Hello, welcome to Oasis Lactation Services on YouTube. Today I wanted to talk about fermented foods and show you how to do home fermentation and the reason why. So in lactation, we have all kinds of outside environmental influences that can impact the way our breastfeeding journey goes and the way our lactation journey goes. One thing that I hope none of you have to experience, though I know some of you will, is mastitis. Mastitis is an inflammation of the breast tissue, and sometimes that can be caused by bacteria, bacterial infections. We have some decent clinical evidence that maintaining a diet rich in probiotics, good bacteria, or taking probiotics can help reduce our risk of developing mastitis. This is especially true for families who have experienced recurring mastitis. Perhaps that antibiotic treatment worked just fine, but several weeks later, the mastitis came back. Definitely work with your lactation consultant. Rule out any latch issues, pump issues, or other environmental issues that could be contributing to this recurring mastitis. And in the meantime, let's talk about probiotics and how those might help. So I'm gonna do some purple cabbage today, or red cabbage. So I washed it with water. I got this at my farmer's market, my co-op actually. I often let my children pick out the vegetables when we go shopping. I find that it helps them eat better. So I'm just gonna take off a few of the outer leaves because we're gonna use those to seal up the jars. And I'm kind of butchering them, and that's okay. They just need to come off. So we're not going to use any kind of soapy wash or anything, and we're really looking for the lactobacillus, which is a bacteria that lives in our soil and is absorbed in a lot of our vegetables. And what we want to do is create an environment that is favorable to that lactobacillus growing and changing the deliciousness of our food. It also can change some of the nutrient content or nutrient bioavailability. So when we talk about probiotics, this is a really firm cabbage. We tend to talk about them as if they're some magical thing that magically goes into your body and changes everything. Well, what's really happening is that as we consume foods that have beneficial bacteria, those bacteria will go to different parts of our gut. I'm interested in the lactobacillus. They tend to be in the colon, and they aid in digestion, and they aid in our development of synthesis of certain bacteria. So when your baby was first born, you were probably offered vitamin K supplementation at birth if you birthed in a hospital or even a birth center. And that's because the baby's gut is quite sterile. It's not completely sterile, but it's definitely not as populated as ours is as adults. And vitamin K synthesis is dependent on some key bacteria in the gut. Baby's gonna get that from the vaginal flora, baby's gonna get that from being skin to skin, and baby's gonna get that from directly feeding right at the breast. So we need that bacteria to help synthesize that vitamin K. And lactobacillus helps us with all kinds of things. I can link to some studies in the comments. So this is how deceptively easy this is. I just chopped it. The finer you chop it, the faster it tends to ferment. I'm leaving mine a little bit long. My children really like to eat their sauerkraut, their fermented cabbage, like on things, like on sandwiches and stuff. So when it's long, it tends to stay in the sandwich or in the taco or burrito a little bit better. The little tiny pieces kind of fall at the sides. So I've shoved some in there, and now I'm just gonna take a generous pinch of salt to get this started. This is salt that is just natural sea salt. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Himalayan pink salt will work. There is gray salt. There's mineral salts. There's different kinds of dirty salts that are on the market. Whichever salt you have is probably just fine. So this little handy dandy gadget is called a kraut pounder, and it helps me tamp down my vegetables. So I'm bruising the salt right there into the cabbage, which is just lovely. So the salt's working down into the cabbage. Some of the fluid in the cabbage is coming out, and that's gonna make our brine. The mixture of the salt that we put in plus the fluid that we pound out is what's gonna make our brine. So if you have one of these, you don't have to do it in the jar. Doing it directly in the jar is probably not safe because this is glass. However, it's the way I like to do it. A lot of people will do their pounding into a large stainless steel bowl or a non-reactive bowl, and then transfer the sauerkraut into jars for pickling. I like to reduce my dishes, so I just do it all in one. And be pretty generous. You know, for a 1 liter container, we'll probably end up with about 2 tablespoons of salt being introduced into that 1 liter container. So I've got some other gadgets to show you that I use when I do my ferments. Home brewing of beer has gotten very popular in the last 10 years. So it's really actually quite easy to get home fermentation kits now because there's so many online brew like websites and things. So, and you may even have a brewery supply place close to where you live. So if some of these items look a little strange or foreign to you, you'd be surprised how easy it is to access them. You also might be surprised at how expensive a chunk of maple wood is. So I kind of covet my kraut pounder. Or in our last move, I couldn't find it amongst the moving boxes, and I had a lot of feelings. I was gonna make an insurance claim on my kraut pounder, but we recovered it, fortunately. Let's see. So my hands are starting to turn a little purple. That's fine. Some people, rather than using the kraut pounder, actually want to do the physical manipulation of the food and work the salt in with their hands. Well, that's super cool. So the enzymes in your hands do help to break down the cellular structures and start to juice the cabbage pretty quickly. So that can be a really amazing method. Children love doing it. So if you've got toddlers who want to put their hands in everything, smashing their hands in cabbage, super fun. And, you know, we're building that hand strength that they're using when they eat, so they can start eventually using utensils and then writing, right? So all of these small developments turn into big developments, right? Eating is that first developmental task, and once we get the eating down, all kinds of cool things follow. So, and this is pretty physically involved, actually, the more I think about it. So my other cool gadgets I'll tell you about. These are called pickling weights, and they're gonna hold down the cabbage so that it can't float away. And then I just started using these. I used to manually burp all my jars. So as they ferment, right, the good bacteria, the probiotics, the lactobacillus grows and it makes gas, right? That's how beer is carbonated, right? It's carbonated through natural fermentation. So sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, also experiences gaseous bubbles forming during the fermentation process. And if you've got your jar sealed on too tight, it can explode. So the options are you can get an airlock, and they sell those at a lot of fermentation places. You can get them on the internet. You can manually burp your jars, which is how they did it in the olden days. Or you can get this called a pickle pipe, and it interacts with a mason jar lid, and it has a little opening here. It's kind of like a bottle nipple, and gas will escape when pressure builds up. And it's lovely. I've used them for fermenting some other things, and it worked really, really well. I didn't have to hand burp my jars every day. I didn't end up with exploded jars in my pantry, which has definitely happened to me before. So I thought it was, there we go. I thought it was a pretty cool little gadget. So my jar is getting pretty full. I only got out 2 jars today. I'll probably only make 2 jars of cabbage with this, and what we don't use, we'll use for some salads. So you don't have to do straight cabbage, but I find that just individual, one at a time ferments to get you started is an easy way to feel a lot more confident, and then you don't have to be so concerned about mixing flavors and what's this thing gonna taste like after it sits and grows, right, and comes alive. So this is just salt, cabbage, and then we're gonna add a little bit of water to it to kind of speed up the process. So I like to use filtered water. You can use distilled water. Distilled water has a little bit of a lower pH, which is good. I already put water in here. I set myself up for success. So I put a little water in, and I'm gonna go ahead and tamp down. You can add shredded carrot, onions, spices, all different kinds of things. But just the straight up salt and water and cabbage sauerkraut is so good. It's so good. And I love using this red cabbage, purple cabbage, whatever you want to call it. It turns this beautiful pink color. And when I had a 3-year-old, she's grown up now, she would call it fairy kraut instead of sauerkraut because it was this beautiful neon pink color. So we're gonna put a little more water in so I can finish this one off. Sometimes I pound and pound and pound and really get it mashed up, but I'm feeling pretty hurried today. So now so I've got my liquid all the way up over my food. So that is a real key here, is that the liquid comes higher than the food. And we're really mashing it down. So now what I want to do is I want to take one of these outer leaves that I saved over to the side, and I am going to make a little cabbage cover. So, and I'm going to mash it all down. This way, if none of the food touches air, it cannot go bad, it cannot rot. That's how fermentation works. So we're taking the food, we're submerging it in something fluid, and then that fluid is so salty because we put so much salt in it that only beneficial bacteria can grow. So I've mashed it down, I got a little floater, I'm gonna take my floater out. So I've mashed that down, so I've got a fluid layer, it's beautiful and purple. I'm gonna take one of my glass pickling weights, and we're gonna slide this on top to make sure it stays down. Remember, we talked about how during fermentation there's gonna be gas bubbles coming up. So I'm actually gonna stack the weights. I'm gonna stack 2 weights. So air is gonna start coming up, carbon dioxide is gonna start coming up, and we want that food to stay submerged. If it doesn't stay submerged, it can grow mold, it can grow yeast, and then we're not preserving it, nor are we helping that lactobacillus really flourish. And then I'm gonna put on my pickle pipe, and that's it. That's how easy that was. So I'm gonna sit this in a dark place and let it ferment. Usually about 7 days. My house is kind of cold right now. It's winter time where I live, and the outdoor temperature is quite low. There's snow on the ground. So my house really doesn't get above 68 right now. Fermentation will be a little bit slower if your house temperature is cool. In the summertime, our home temperature is closer in the 72, 73. We actually keep it pretty hot in the summertime. And so fermentation for something like this would probably take only about 3 or 4 days. But in this cool time, I'm gonna leave it for about a week. when I do test it, I'm gonna take out the pickle pipes and the weights and pull up that cabbage. And I'm gonna test it and taste it and see if I like the crispness level. If I want it a little softer, I'll pack it all back up and stick it back in the darkness and let it go. If it's just right, take it out and stick it in the fridge. And the fermentation slows way, way, way down. Now it does continue to some small degree while it's refrigerated. But we've kept those probiotics in the food and we're keeping them stable. And so now we can just take a little scoop of sauerkraut whenever we want, add it to a sandwich, put it on a salad, and get those beneficial bacteria in our gut. So that is our crash course in how to do a fermented vegetable. I will be doing some more of these, particularly in the heat of the summer when all of the amazing farmers market produce is available to work with and ferment and make amazing different pickled things. I absolutely love pickled things. I love introducing them to children. Kids love pickled food. It tastes delicious, it's fun, it's a little bit stinky, and they love to eat anything that, smells like cabbage, smells like sulfur. So thank you so much for joining me on Oasis Lactation Services today. Make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, give me a thumbs up. Put in the comments if you have a pickle recipe that you want to share, or if there's a type of fermentation that you would like to learn about. I ferment lots of other things too, and I'd be more than happy to show you how I do it. So give me a ring if mastitis has been a recurring issue for you, and we can talk about how a probiotic supplement or probiotic food can help reduce your risk of having mastitis one more time, as well as other things about latch, milk removal, and pumping that we can do to protect your breast health so that you can reach your breastfeeding goal. I'll see you next time.